Hi, so today we're going to talk about math because it's that time of year that curriculum is on sale and everybody is typically trying to figure out, well, what am I going to be doing next year? They either loved the curriculum and tools that they use to teach, or like me, they're always looking for, well, is there something better out there? But math is one of those subjects that I wanted to give you kind of an inside glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes so that you don't get overwhelmed as you're looking for curriculum. I'm going to try not to jiggle the computer around as I do this. So I made you some handy slides. Math, you don't need to find particular curriculum. What you need to understand is that math is really broken into three basic subject areas. You've got your arithmetic, your algebra, and your geometry. And when it comes to teaching math, I want you to switch gears a little bit and remember that it's not about curriculum, it's not about what grade your child is in, but it's about grouping particular kinds of math together as you are teaching your child. So there are only three basic areas of math, and typically it's kind of like a staircase. My backwards computer. Usually we start our kids, and this is because of the way that your brain develops. You start your kids in the area of arithmetic from the time that they're ready to start playing with numbers until the time they're somewhere in middle school. And we're going to talk about what arithmetic means in a minute. But if your kids are anywhere between preschool up to 5th, 6th, 7th grade, the area of math that you're going to want to focus on until they're rock stars in it is arithmetic. Once they master arithmetic and they're ready for higher math, then you'd move on to algebra. And I recommend that you don't rush into algebra don't go even into algebra until your kids have mastered all of their fundamental math facts, until they can measure, until they know time and money and all fractions and percentages and stuff. We'll go into detail in a second. So you start with arithmetic, then you move to algebra, and then sometime in high school you hit geometry. And geometry is one of those love or hate subjects. I happen to love geometry. I have sons that like it and sons that hate it. So it just depends on kind of the way that your brain is knit together. So when you're thinking about math, if you're only thinking about math in terms of curriculum, you're going to get lost. And I know this from experience because is this going to teach my kid everything that they need to know by the time they graduate high school? Do I need to piece together a few things? When really, if you can just take a step back and understand that there are only those three areas of math that they need to be rock stars in by the time they graduate, and then within each of those categories, there are really only a dozen or 18 concrete type things that they need to master in each of those arenas of arithmetic. So let me show you what I mean. If your kids are preschool to that middle school age, then you're going to want to be focusing on the area of arithmetic. And arithmetic really has to do with knowing your numbers really well. So counting, recognizing your numbers, knowing the words for the numbers, word form, standard form, that kind of stuff. You're also going to need to master place value. So we all know that the numbers that represent like 100 is represented by the digit 1 put in a different place within a number, right? So our kids need to understand place value. They need to know their facts, inside and out, upside down. This is one of those times that adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, you not only need to memorize, but the kids need to over-memorize them. So lots of games, lots of hands-on manipulatives, lots of stuff to get those math facts mastered. They'll also need to understand fractions, and cooking and dividing and sharing are a great way to handle fractions, but there's all kinds of games and activities that you can do to learn fractions. Kids also need to know decimals, because money uses decimals all over the place. So you need to understand money, you need to understand all your numbers, fractions. They should be able to understand their measurements. So that's using rulers, yardsticks, measuring cups for cooking, all the different ways of measuring. They should be able to tell time. There really still are analog clocks with the big hand and the little hand out there. And it's amazing how many kids don't know how to tell time. They should be able to, they should play with money, real money. Even though everybody uses debit cards now and ATM cards, there's still pennies, nickels, quarters, dimes, and kids should be able to recognize all of their coins and their money and their bills, but also to be able to count and to break change. That's a really good activity. Percents is a really big area in this arithmetic arena. And I have a video, I'll drop the link to it below this, but there is a secret to solving percents. Thank you, my friend Jamie. And it is called is over of, and I have a whole video that explains how to do that. So if your kids are between that preschool to middle school age, these are the types of things that they need to learn before they move on into algebra. There aren't really that many things. So arithmetic. When you're looking at curriculum, you're looking for, well, how are these things addressed? Does your kid like to read? So lots of words explaining how to do it, color, pictures. The curriculums all have a different take on how they present these things, but they are repeated over and over and over again, all through that elementary stage of mathematics. So once your kids once your children make it through arithmetic, then their brain is able to do higher problem solving, and so they're able to move on into algebra. And algebra is that time in math where you start to replace numbers or groups of numbers with letters or things called variables. And with algebra, that's where I like to use my dad's famous saying of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. When studying for a college entrance exam with my son this last year, algebra really became crystal clear to me in that the beauty of algebra is being able to break things down into smaller bites or to build them back up again. And the core of algebra really is eating an elephant, one bite at a time. Understanding that numbers are made up of different sets of numbers. So breaking a number like 24 down into its factors, and factors are the numbers that you can multiply together to get to a number. So for instance, the factors of 24 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. And those are the factors of 24. Those are the different numbers that you can play with multiplication and division to get to the number 24. I have a child sneaking up behind me. Algebra is also about balance, because when you're dealing with equations, he's going to walk by with a sword. There he goes. Okay. In algebra, everything is about balance. So whatever you do to one side of an equation, you always do to the other side of the equation. Algebra is about equations. Equation is a sentence that includes an equal sign in it. So algebra, breaking things down logically. The magic of the quadratic equation. That's higher math, but algebra and factoring and breaking things down into different parts really all leads up to this quadratic equation. And don't fret, it's not that hard. There are lots of tutorials out there on the internet, and if you need helps and tips, just let me know because I can point you in the right direction. Algebra also includes this whole thing about a function and linear functions and graphing. And really the core of algebra is logic. and solving problems and being able to go back and forth with numbers, starting with a big number and breaking it down into a little number, or starting with a little number and exploding it up into a bigger number. So algebra is really about breaking things down and building things up. And the logic between, well, how do I get from point A to point B is really what algebra is all about. And although I'm not a mathematician, the kid that's about to walk by me again with a sword is a mathematician. And for me, I just need to understand how you solve a problem. For him, he needs to understand why. And so with algebra, there are lots of tutorials and lots of help online that can help give you real life examples of why this is relevant. So before we move on to geometry, if your kids are little, you're going through arithmetic and basic understanding of numbers in general. When they get older, middle school, don't rush this. Really stay in arithmetic until they're ready. But middle school, you start to get into algebra and you start to get into functions and equations and that quadratic equation, breaking things down into these fancy things called binomials. It's fun, but there's a lot of help online to help you if it's overwhelming or confusing. Once your kids are in high school-ish age, when they have that reasoning happening in there, that abstract reasoning, then you get into geometry. And truly, geometry is all about the magic triangle. That's not totally true, but it's about shapes. And the core of high school level geometry is truly understanding the relationship between shapes. This is the sign for perpendicular. So perpendicular lines, parallel lines, different relationships in triangles. The right triangle, there's a lot to do with a right triangle. And a right triangle has a 90-degree angle. There is so much to be learned about triangles in general, how their angles are related, how their sides are related. There's all kinds of things that they learn with area and perimeter, and there is a ton that you can do with geometry by just building and hands-on learning. And the point of the different areas of mathematics is that you start with arithmetic, where the numbers, it's all counting and skip counting and fact families and percentages and fractions. You start with that concrete math. Then you move up into a higher level thinking math, where you're problem solving, you're filling in the blank, you're moving things around, making numbers bigger, making numbers smaller. And then you move into this other arena of geometry where you're studying shapes and angles and lines, and each area of math has its own place in life. Most of us are quite content just dealing with arithmetic. Everything I do in life, from balancing my checkbook, yes, I still have a checkbook, balancing my checkbook, balancing my budget, creating recipes, cooking recipes, etc., all that's done with arithmetic. Algebra, for me, is playing school. I don't have a big mental need to understand why I need to know that x plus 3 equals whatever. But there's a lot of jobs and real life applications that can use algebra to make life easier. Geometry is beautiful when it comes to hands-on projects. The relationship of a triangle and its angles and its sides is fantastic when you're building. And if your kids look around, they'll see triangles everywhere. So I wanted to let you know that as you're looking for curriculum with math, don't get lost. Take a step back and understand that there are really only those 3 areas of math, that there really is arithmetic when they're young, algebra when they get a little bit older, and geometry when they hit high school. And once you know, you can be hunting for what those specific areas that they need to learn in each one of those disciplines. Typically in school, you spend years studying arithmetic, and then years studying algebra, and then a year or two studying geometry when you're in high school. And by then you kind of get a feel for what you're doing mathematically, so that if you do end up going to college to study something, you have an idea of where your strengths are with math. So I hope that helps. I do have what I'm calling a math roadmap for you, and if you would like a free copy of that math roadmap, what I've done is I've broken the 3 basic areas of math down with a good selection of the types of topics or the types of things that kids need to understand how to do within each of those areas for you, and then some guidelines on activities and such